Welcome to the Truth Expedition. I'm your host, Mark Bishofsky, and you have tuned into the program where we're going to do our best to deliver you some truth in this insane freak show of a world where the fact checkers lie and the government and the media propagandize you and me, the citizens of this wonderful world. For reference, it's September 29th, 2023, and I am grateful and blessed once again for the second week in a row to have our fabulous co-host here today. David from Mask Off, Minnesota is here once again. Thank you, David, for coming again.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mark. I'm super excited to be here once again. It's going to be a lot of fun today.
It is. Our guest today, I cannot wait. It's like a bucket list interview for me today. But so tell us, David, anything coming up for Mask Off, any events you want the people to know about?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So coming up Sunday, October 22nd at the Crystal VFW at 2 p.m., we have the amazing Kenny Maurer and Dr. Scott Jensen. We're focusing on their lawsuits. There's some epic lawsuits happening right now. And some huge updates actually going to be announced at our meeting that day. So it's a Sunday. It's going to be amazing. There's no Vikings game that day, so there's no excuse not to come. Completely free. 2 o'clock doors, 3 o'clock program, and we're actually going to have some health freedom groups there. The Mayo employees who are suing the Mayo over the mandates will be there. Kind of introduce themselves and networking, as well as the Medical Justice MN group, which is the group of folks, families who are suing the hospitals for the hospital protocols,
for the remdesivir,
for the murders, exactly. The remdesivir usage and the ventilation usage and all that stuff. It's amazing as we're going on, we're finding out that a lot of the deaths were not from COVID alone, but from the protocols. So we're going to have those two groups there. It's going to be a packed meeting, actually. It's going to be amazing. I'm actually worried that we're going to run out of time and space because we have a lot of interest already, and we only have about 200 space for about 200 folks in the VFW there. So please come early. It's going to be an amazing time, and it should be a lot of fun, too. A lot of fun. So Sunday, October 22nd, Crystal VFW.
Yeah, I plan on being there as well, the 22nd. It's on Bass Lake Road, I believe, in Crystal. Yep. It's pretty easy to get to. 2 to 6 is kind of what you're saying for the time there. It's going to be fun. Kenny, he's suing the woke NBA. They're taking his pension. They fired him. They made these referees take the jab. He submitted a medical exemption. They refused. The thing is, the players don't have to get jabbed, and the new refs, incoming, don't have to. But for him to be reinstated and get his pension back, they're going to make him take the jab. It is bizarre. You can't make sense of this shit. The world has gone mad.
And it's a different jab now, Mark. I mean, remember back when it was required by the NBA originally, it was a completely different jab that they were requiring. Now it's, that's not even available anymore, but they're still requiring, the new one. So, okay. Where's the science behind that, Yeah. And I always say, compliance is not science. And Kenny Maurer is a great example of standing up for his convictions, almost like the famous tennis player, Novak.
Djokovic. Yeah. Novak, the Joker, I call him. And I love tennis. I'm a tennis player, and I've always loved Novak, but, man, I love him now, man. He's got the most Grand Slam victories. Probably no one will ever beat that. And he had to miss several major Grand Slam tournaments because he couldn't come to the U.S. He was able to get back in this year and won the U.S. Open.
In front of Bill Gates.
Unjabbed. I mean, how can an unvaccinated person even continue to play tennis? I mean, how can he be healthy enough if he didn't take that injection? It doesn't make any sense. So
follow the science, Mark.
Anything else? I don't have any events upcoming for Stop the Mandate, MN. Just helping to support Mask Off at this time. But yeah, so our guest today, I'll do a more proper interview. We always wait for our guest to land virtually in our virtual green room. We're going to check for that soon. Our guest is Max Igan, and I will give a proper introduction once he has landed. So we're going to move on now to the interview segment of the Truth Expedition. All right, we've landed. Our guest is here virtually, and this to me is a bucket list interview. I am so grateful today. So our guest today is Max Igan, and Max is an Australian activist, a blogger, a documentarian. He's a former radio host. He's a promoter of freedom and awareness, and I've been following Max's work for several years now, and I will tell you the amount of shit that I have learned that I wouldn't have learned otherwise continues to stack up every single time I watch his walk and talks. He's been correctly predicting the moves that are being made by the global elite. And he warned the world what was coming, warned us about what we're dealing with now. He teaches about the dystopian new world order, but he does present inspirational solutions for dealing with the truth spiritually and mentally. Max is an enlightening beacon of knowledge, and you can follow Max's work and watch his documentaries, which there are many, on thecrowhouse.com, thecrowhouse.com. You can follow him on Telegram. It's the Crow House there as well. And also on Rumble, he's got a new Rumble channel, but do make sure, because Max's work is copied and faked, make sure you do the Crow House original when you go to Rumble and I'm sure once you dig in, you're going to continue to follow Max's work. So thank you so much, Max. Like I said, this is a bucket list interview for me. If this is the last one I ever do, I will feel fulfilled. So thank you so much, Max.
Pleasure to be here, guys. Thanks for having me on. Nice to connect with you. And thanks for the intro. Wonderful intro.
Yeah. So I think a lot of the viewers here at the Truth Expedition probably do not know who Max is, and I know Max has probably told this a million times, but just in brief, I've always thought the government was, corrupt. I've never trusted it, ever. But I didn't really wake up to the fact that the world is just theater until after 9/11. So you've been at it since before then. What was it for you, Max? What made you start digging into the truth?
I've been awake pretty much my whole life. When I was a kid, when I was like 4 years old, and my parents told me we had to buy land, I was horrified in the concept. I didn't realize as a little child that we actually had to pay to put a roof over our heads, and we had to pay to be alive, and everything had a dollar value to it. I thought we were just here to live and be free and get along with each other. And I could never understand why there were any starving people in the world. I used to see this on TV all the time, Ethiopia and stuff. And I used to look at the supermarkets and go, these are all full of food. How come there's people starving out there when there's all this food sitting in the supermarkets? Why can't we just give them that food, And it was when I realized we had to pay to be alive when I was 4, I realized that I was living in a madhouse. And I started listening to people's conversations and my mother and stuff. And I thought, they're just talking about nothing. They're just gossiping about other people. There's no talk about life and all the things we could do with the world, And so I just became a sort of a strange child from that point and observed everything. And by the time I got into my 3rd year of high school, I'd been kicked out of 4 different schools by that point for arguing with my teachers. So I just said, forget this. And I walked out halfway through my exams, became a musician, lived on the outside of society for most of my life as a musician, traveling musician, and just kind of observed the freak show. And it was always a hobby to be able to look at things and predict what they were going to do. I mean, when I was in high school, I was telling people, you notice all the legislation that comes into being that they bring in place, none of it is to actually help us. They pretend that it's about helping us and improving our society, but all it ever does is take more of your rights away. And if we continue on this same path with this same trajectory, I predict that we'll all be living in a prison by the time we hit the turn of the century. Turns out I was like 20 years out, but we're kind of moving into that now. But it just became obvious. I mean, when you really look at the world through the right type of eyes and you look at it as a human experience, it becomes obvious that there's a controlling hand at the top that is attempting to limit and curtail that experience and lead us all into this control grid where we're just these commodities that they can traffic and trade and profit from, and it all works out for themselves, and it just gets worse and worse for us. And I was just able to see this at a very early age. And the thing is, when you can see where they're going, you see the result of their actions is going to be complete control of everything you do, every aspect of your life. And that's what the agenda is. Then you look at the stuff they do and you can see the steps they make along the way, always moving towards this same agenda. And that's how it's so easy to predict what they're going to do next, because you know what the end goal is. And that's just the way it was. So, I woke up really early. I was very fortunate in as much as I didn't have that red pill moment that a lot of people have. They've lived to 40 or 50 years old, and they suddenly find out that everything they've been talking about is false. Their whole world is false. They've been living a lie for their whole lives. And it's very, very confronting for a lot of people. They go into that cognitive dissonance, and it kind of freaks them out. Their whole world collapses. That's why it's so difficult to wake people up after a certain age, because it's too much for them to bear, to realize that their whole life has been a lie. It's almost in the Matrix, like in the Matrix when they say once people are past a certain age, it's dangerous to wake them up. It's kind of like that as well. And I was fortunate in as much as I never had to go through that. I've been awake for my entire life. So, but it gets to a point. I mean, it was a hobby just looking at the control grid. It was just something that was fascinating how this was there and people couldn't see it. And, you're living your life on the outside as a musician. It's all good. And when 9/11 happened, I kind of realized that world I'd created myself was kind of a bubble that I was living in so that I wouldn't have to actually do anything about what's going on in the world. But when 9/11 happened, like so many other people, it became serious. I mean, they've just killed 2,997 people live on TV. Perhaps I need to start sharing this information because this is actually getting quite serious. So at that point of my life, what was my hobby suddenly became my main forte in life, and being a musician became my hobby. So I kind of just shifted directions. But it was interesting as well because being a musician, I got to travel the world. I got to live on the outside of society. I got to meet people from all walks of life. And I got to travel and like only working maybe 15 hours a week or something and playing guitar and doing front of house. So it's not really working anyway. So I had plenty of spare time to go around the world and travel and look at all these exotic places and find all the information that I needed to do exactly what I'm doing now. If it wasn't for that musicianship, I never would have been able to do that. And when it got to the point where it was time to step onto my path, my real path, which is what I'm doing now, the universe took everything away from me. I lost all my music. I had broke up with my wife. She stole all my possessions. Like the universe took away everything from me except for my research, and that was the only path I had left to step onto. But like I said, my life before that point put me in a position where I could gather all the information I needed. And then when I had it, I had all the tools that I needed to do what I'm doing now. It gave me no choice but to step onto this path and to start presenting this information to people. So it's kind of weird how the world works, but not probably the normal path that other people have been on, but it's been a path that I've been on for most of my life. Yeah, I hope that made sense.
Yeah, it does. And that you're an oddity because most people that are awake to everything going on right now, it took like 9/11. That's kind of what it took for me. And you're absolutely right. I know people, otherwise intelligent people, philosophy professor, where I laid out my argument just algorithmically. He's like, Mark, I can't argue with you, but not trusting my government is a step I can't take. They don't want to go there. And what happened to me, Max, is, and I hear you talk about politicians and such. So I had to give up my career. I'm a respiratory therapist. There's no way I was going to take this frickin' genocide jab. I started fighting out, having rallies. Everything kind of went viral for me. So I was asked to run for office, and my first thought was, screw this. It's just it's a fucking worse than a swamp. But I did. I lost, and the thing is, and you're absolutely right, because if they realize, like I told them, you're not going to control me. I'm here to make this government small. Because Max, I'm an anarcho-capitalist. The smallest government you can have. But what happened to me is the Republican Party fought me too. They spent like a record amount of money against me. They slandered me. It's like, you wonder if your life's at risk, even for just a state house. But I guess my question is, do you feel like it's even worth voting? Is there even a chance that we can carve the shit out, from the inside out? Can anyone good get in and make a difference?
Well, if you can get away from the two-party system, it might work. Unfortunately, a lot of people need government. A lot of people simply aren't responsible enough or intelligent enough or educated enough to be able to govern themselves. As much as you want an anarcho-capitalist type of society, unfortunately, that society requires people of integrity to be participating in that society. If government was to collapse right now and there was nothing left, it would be dog eat dog, and it would be the rise of the mobs, and it would be terrible, really. So, I mean, we've got to a point where it's a process to try to get us back to some sort of point of safety. But the problem is, as you discovered, you go into that system and you try operating within those parameters, and it just doesn't work. The parameters are designed to lock you into either the two-party system or you won't get anywhere. And if you join a two-party system, like if you join the Republicans or whatever, you're going to find that they actually have an agenda. They might appear great on the surface and say all the right things and appear patriotic, but ultimately, if, like I said, if you know what the goal is, you find that they're all moving towards the same goal. They might be using different strokes for different folks and different ways to appease people. So when the Republicans get in, they slow the train down a little bit so you don't see the changes as quickly as you do with the Democrats. But, it's all leading towards the same thing. So, I mean, all you can really hope from joining the political arena is to make enough public noise to awaken people. But again, they go into cognitive dissonance. You're offering them a reality that they might actually have to think about, and that's a scary thing for a lot of people. They prefer to just vote for this guy, and they believe he'll get the job done. So, it's really got to the point, especially in the United States, that I don't think there's any political solution. Yeah, and it's different in different countries. I mean, in the United States, admittedly, you've got the sort of a system where, I mean, not everybody has to vote. It's not compulsory. And if all of the good people don't vote, all the bad people do, and it goes where it's going because people believe the system's real. So maybe there's some hope in voting in the United States, but where are you going to find the right candidate to do it? We've tried that with a few people and it hasn't really worked. In countries like Australia, it's compulsory to vote. If you don't vote, well, then the ruling parasites get in every time. So it's a weird thing. But I'd like to see if everybody simply boycotted everybody. But when are you going to get people to do that? That's the thing. You might get to a point where, all the people of the United States don't vote, and there's only 1,000 people who do. But if they're all the ruling parasites, well, it's going to go where it's going to go, because that's the way it is. So, I mean, the greatest hope really for freedom is putting awareness into people. But it's kind of got to the point now that I can't see any political remedy from any type of direction. I don't even know how we could stage a revolution or protests or whatever and shut the system down from this point. I think it's got to the point that we've simply got to let the system implode. That's the only thing that's going to bring it down. It's going to self-destruct, and it's well on the way to doing that. And it's how you and your friends and people we know and people who are aware can navigate through the coming collapse that's happening. Because when it does happen, I mean, the worst thing you can do is run to government and ask them to help and fix things, because they're the ones who created the problem, simply so you'd run to them for help. It's just the way it works, Hegelian dialectic. So, I say to people that I see nothing to fear from the impending collapse of the slavery system. But what you should be doing at the moment, most people should be doing, is focusing on regaining their life skills, developing strong ties with the people in their community so that they are in a position to be able to navigate themselves away through the coming collapse. And you're going to see a lot of death and destruction and mayhem and society collapsing around you. And that's the way it's going to be, unfortunately. And you're not going to be able to help a lot of these people as much as you want to. I mean, everyone's had a pretty good chance and a pretty good opportunity to wake up over the last 20 years or so. I mean, if you couldn't see it from 9/11, then you should have been able to see it, what's been happening through COVID and everything that they've just done to us. And so, ultimately it's people's choice. And we're in sort of almost uncharted territory at the moment. And I've been saying to people, now's the time for you to look after yourself as much as you want to wake others up. And we continue to do that to try to, because people are waking up on their own from the jab and blah, blah, blah. So we try to provide some sort of a safety net for them as they do. But really, you should be putting your focus on yourself, your local community, your family, your friends, and working out some sort of a strategic way of navigating through the coming mess. So we're really heading into uncharted territory at the moment, brother.
You mean, so trusting the plan isn't going to cut it? There's so many people that just, the white hats are going to come in, Trump's going to roll in, it's going to be martial law, he's going to put everyone in the deep state in prison. And
oh yeah, of course he is. Of course he is. Look at the last three. I mean, all this trusted plan stuff, Q and all this, it's just collateral damage, and really collateral damage. Look at how many people have been killed. Look at the amount of businesses that have been destroyed. Look at New York at the moment. It's outrageous. Look at the cities in the United States, the rape, pillage, and plunder that's going on everywhere. All of our countries are being overrun with migrants. The destruction of Europe. I mean, what is all this part of the plan? I bet they had to do this so people would notice, did they? I mean, it's a joke. It's a complete joke. The whole Q and Trump thing and white hats. It's been a patriot appeasement operation. The whole thing. Just sit back, just wait, trust the plan, don't rock the boat. Everything's going to be good. And meanwhile, we're putting out all this surveillance stuff. We're poisoning you all with jabs. We're opening the borders and letting just outrageous people just flood into all of Europe, all of America, all Western countries. They're bringing in like 1 million Africans into Australia at the moment. And I've got no problem with refugees and people who need help, but this is ridiculous. What we're saying, it's not a refugee influx. This is an invasion. And it's pretty obvious to see. And it's all been run by our governments. So they want to homogenize the world into one thing. And it all serves their purpose. I mean, even with the riots and the looting and stuff that's going on in the United States, gone on in Philadelphia in the last couple of weeks, all this stuff will create the need for them to bring in surveillance cameras and the need to close a lot of these stores and the need for digital IDs and tracking and everyone will be shopping online and all this sort of stuff. It's all necessary to keep businesses and people safe. So it all supports their same agenda. And I can't see any trust in the plan at all.
Yeah, I don't
I think
trust
their
the plan.
plan has worked quite well. It's worked for them, but it hasn't really worked out for us.
Yep.
Hey, Max, recently you said something I thought was extremely, extremely profound. You said, just because everyone thinks something is true doesn't make it true. Just because everyone thinks something is right doesn't make it right. Just because everyone thinks something is good doesn't make it good. I thought that was extremely profound. And with that being said, earlier when you first came on, you mentioned about the monetary system when you were growing up and how you were surprised by that. I'm just curious, I've seen a documentary called Zeitgeist where they kind of talk about the monetary system, and what they propose is a resource-based economy, not based on money. I'm just curious, how do you feel about the monetary system? Could we, as society, could we live without money?
I think we could. I think that, a lot of tribal cultures did, a lot of island cultures did. They didn't know anything about money until we came along and introduced it to them. If you're going to be in this type of economic situation, we're in multinational economic situation where you're trading with other countries and sure, you need some sort of medium of trade. So, it depends on what value you're putting on money and what you need money for. You look at countries like Libya, where everybody in Libya was given a free house, free accommodation. It was considered a human right in Libya. Everybody was given free medicals. Everyone was given free lots of stuff. If you needed education, it was provided for you by the government, all this sort of stuff. A lot of people look at this and say, oh, this is a socialist society. But by the same token, Gaddafi was sharing the oil wealth with the people. The country had no debt whatsoever. People got all the money they needed if they wanted to go. People grow food and they got shops and they run businesses. And so money kind of has a place, it depends on, like I said, what you believe you need it for. But why should you need to pay to be alive? The basic necessities of life, a roof over your head, your access to food, your access to shelter. These things these are God-given. When did government come along and suddenly say that you've got to pay to put a roof over your head? Well, what am I supposed to do? Go and just live out in the forest or something, or go to the ocean and just sit in a boat for the rest of my life or something? How does this work? Why have you created a situation where the most basic needs of life you have to pay for it? It doesn't make sense at all. If you don't, you're discarded. We created an economic system in order to give us the ability to trade and interact with each other and to excel in our lives. If you're good at something, you can make something, you can provide that for other people and let them use it, and they'll give you something for that. That's kind of what money should be used for. But the fact that we've got to use it for the most basic necessities. I have to pay to put a roof over my head. I have to pay to put food in my mouth. When there's material out there, and there's land everywhere. People say the world's overpopulated. It's actually not. There's land everywhere. Why can't I just go somewhere that I think is okay? I'd like to be here, build a little shelter for myself, put up a free energy device so I've got energy, and just live my life. Why can't I do that? Why do I have to pay to access the abundance of all the food that's growing around me? These are the sorts of problems where we start seeing real issues. So, we've got to pay for basic necessities. We've got to pay for energy. We've got to pay basically to be alive. And like I said, we created a money system that is supposed to serve us. And suddenly we become the most expendable thing within the parameters of the money system in order to balance the books. If it was non-interest-based money, perhaps it could work. But this whole Federal Reserve interest-based, usury-based system that we've got now does not work. And I mean, they used to use tally sticks, they used to use shells, they used to use gold, they used to use silver, they used to use all sorts of things just as a medium of trade. And that's fine. I can see a place for that because we have some sort of social structure and people are going to be doing things. They're not going to want to just sit there and twiddle their thumbs all day. People like to be creative. They like to sell their stuff. They like to do artwork and actually, have a comfortable life and not have to worry about stuff, so they continue doing the art of their life. So I can see a place where money would fit in, but not usury-based money. It doesn't make any sense at all. We live our lives simply doing what we can in order to gather that which we need to pay to be alive. So when you get a job somewhere, you're working at some place and say, okay, I need a unit or a house nearby my work. So I've got to pay for that. And then I need a car in order to get to my work. And so, your money that you're bringing in from your pay is simply paying for the things that you need in order to go to work. And you're paying all this money for a house that you're never in because you're working all day. You're spending all this money on a car that's parked most of the day because you're in work doing stuff. So, and you live to your means. And the more money you make at your work, the more you buy stuff to make sure you can continue working. It's just this loop. You're like a hamster on a wheel. So I mean, like I said, money could have a place in a real world, but not the type of money that we're using now, and not the type of economic situation that we're in now. But again, even like I said, when you go back to tribal cultures, I mean, they didn't have money. They didn't use this stuff until Western people came along and gave it to them. And that's the interesting thing about money. Like once people start using it, they find it very difficult to understand how they ever lived without it. And yet many people live hundreds or thousands of years in their societies without this stuff. So it's kind of like a total mind control program, this dependence on money. I've always, lived my life. I don't really care about it. I think life is an emotional mirror. And the more you stress over money, the less you have. The more you stress over anything in life, the more that's going to affect you. And because it's an emotional mirror. And I've always said, have no stake in the outcome. Just throw yourself to the wind. And when you do, you'll find you can ride it. But we all believe we need this economic thing and we need this economic security. Like we need a house to buy and all this sort of stuff. When you buy a house and you buy land, it owns you now. You can't travel away from it. You think you own it, but you're not. You're still paying rates and paying all this stuff, paying to be alive. And if you stop paying that, they'll take it off you pretty quick. So I don't know why you ever thought you owned it to begin with. But it owns you if you buy somewhere and you buy all this stuff to put in it, then suddenly you're tied to that spot. You're tied to the area. You've got to be able to get up and have the ability to be able to just go and like I said, throw yourself to the wind, do whatever you want. And if you're too tied up in the economic system, it's never going to happen. But they've created a situation whereby this is what controls our lives. This whole economic system is what controls our lives. And people simply don't understand how it works. They don't understand how the money system works. Dozens of books have been written on it. The Creature from Jekyll Island. So many people have tried to tell others what this money system is all about, but they just don't seem to get it. So, I mean, it's a weird thing. Money could work, but not the system that we've got.
Yeah.
Yeah, Max, I actually attended a few End the Fed rallies here in Minneapolis many years ago, and I was really hopeful that that movement would kind of go a little more mainstream than it did. But unfortunately, it didn't, and we're all still using our Federal Reserve dollars. But just changing gears here a little bit, recently you said that government is the leading cause of death. And yeah. The easiest way to depopulate is to have the people do it themselves. And with that being said, I'm just curious because one of the other things that I heard you mention was that you said there's some evidence that the world is reset every 150 years and that we repopulate with children. I just wonder if you could expand on that a little bit because I was a brand new idea to me, and I would love to explore that concept a bit with you.
When you look at things, something that's recent, like we've identified that a lot of the architecture you see around the world is very similar all around the world. There was obviously a culture that existed on the earth not too long ago that was far more advanced than we are. When you look at some of the cathedrals and churches, some of the artistic nature of some of the buildings across Europe, there's a lot going on that we're not aware of. Recently, in the last maybe 5 or 6 years, there's been evidence arise that shows that there's been layers of civilization buried beneath our own, what we're calling a mud flood, for want of a better word. I mean, when I was in Holland in 2018, I was walking past a couple of building sites, and my friend was pointing out to me that below ground there, where they're excavating the ground to try to put in new foundations, there's actually layers of civilization. There's like staircases and buildings, and the walls that we see on the street here actually go down below, sometimes 2 or 3 stories below ground. And nobody knew that any of this was there. They just put in new floors, they put in new roads, and they pretend that there's nothing beneath there. And we're seeing this in Seattle. We're seeing this in Melbourne. We're seeing this in Italy. We're seeing this in Russia. We're seeing this all over the world. So there's evidence that they simply, layers of civilization are buried, and then they put new layers of civilization on top. And I started looking into things and discovered stuff like the orphan trains and the foundling homes that were right across Europe around circa 1880. There was hundreds of thousands of children all discovered across Europe. There were hundreds of thousands of children shipped across the United States in orphan trains. There were hundreds of thousands of children sent out to Australia, to Africa, all over the world. They basically repopulated the world with children around about circa 1880. There's been other evidence that has come along which has suggested these cataclysms that happened are actually cyclic, and they happen around about every 100 to 150 years. So, I mean, this is research of other people that are putting those dates in there, but I tend to agree with them when I look at the evidence that we've got, like when Australia was colonized, when the United States was colonized, some of the stuff that's happened. I mean, all you can really believe about history is that which exists within living memory. Before that, it's all written in books, and these books are presented to us by the same people that are running the world and the education system now. So I would suggest that you might need to question these things. But yeah, there's a lot of evidence to suggest this happens. They simply repopulate the world with children. They teach them whatever history that they want, and then they tell them there's just been an industrial revolution. 50 years down the track, they invent a television for them, and we end up to where we are now. Something that I've always used to demonstrate this is the stories of the scrying mirrors, the covens and the black mirrors that you look into that show you the future and the past, and the sigils for summoning demons that they say go along with these mirrors. When you look at them, you see the sigils look like electrical circuitry, the sort of stuff you see in cell phones and televisions. And what's a cell phone or a television? It's a black mirror that you look into that tells you everything you need to know about the future and the past. These are the black mirrors that they talk about. Why would these legends exist if this technology was new, or have they done this before? There's a lot of evidence to suggest this. And you look what's going on in our cities. I mean, if you really want to depopulate the United States, what's the best way to do it? We saw race riots and race wars in your country. You convince the black people that they came there as slaves, and that they've all been downtrodden their whole lives, and everything's terrible and they need reparation. And when you start looking at this, there's a lot of things wrong with this story as well. There were slaves all over the world. Everybody had slaves. The Irish were enslaved almost more than anybody else. But there were as many white slaves as there were black slaves. And even the black slaves, many of them had black slave masters. And they were sold into slavery by their black slave masters. Same with the white people, same with all people. It's been this ongoing thing. But you create one concept in people's minds where they believe they're downtrodden and they need restitution from the other people. And so you see what's going on in the United States now. You see a lot of the stores that are being looted and trashed and smashed and all this stuff that's happening, a lot of it is black people. And I don't have a problem with black people at all. I know lots of black people, a lot of really intelligent, good black people out there. So you can't just say this is a racist thing. But you get the lower levels of society, you keep them poor, you keep them impoverished, and then you teach them that they have a chip on their shoulder and they need reparation. And you're going to stop charging these people for crimes and things, you know. So, and they go out and they trash society. You end up with all of your infrastructure destroyed within your society, and your society ends up imploding and basically eating itself. And then you come in and just clean up the mess. I mean, look what we've got in the world at the moment. We've got black people hating on white people hating on black people. We've got Asians and blacks clashing, Asians and whites clashing. We've got everybody clashing. Everyone's against everybody else because everybody believes they are more deserving because of the history that they've been taught about themselves, which is ultimately false. I mean, this whole system has been designed to play people off against each other and to allow the ruling hand to simply come in and clean up the mess, divide and conquer. That's how it works. And that's what we're seeing in our society now. We're seeing a complete breakdown of Western civilization, and it's been done by design. They put forth the concept that we can't be living the way we are and have the third world living the way they are. It's simply not fair. And people go, yeah, I agree, it's not fair. Say, hey, we'll fix that. But they never mentioned that they were actually going to bring the third world up to the level of the first world, did they? No. What they're going to do is drop the first world down to the level of the third world. It's a little cheaper for them to do that. It costs too much money to actually help the other people. And all they've got to do is create this racial division and make people feel like they've been oppressed far more than they have, and that they've been victims of this completely false history, and that they have these grudges that go back generations that they need to focus on, and basically inflict themselves and everybody around them. So that's how you do it, and that's what we're seeing in all of our cultures, even in Australia now. This new referendum they're bringing in, the voice referendum to recognise the Aboriginal people. They're basically introducing racism into the Australian Constitution under the guise of protecting us from racism. It's absolutely incredible, and people just buy along with it, and it's just creating this division and this implosion of all of our societies, which of course creates the need for us to go, please, someone come and help me. Oh, government, my friend, please come and fix everything for us. Problem, reaction, solution, brother. That's how they do it. And we're seeing this in all of our societies. But there's a lot of evidence that these previous civilizations were here. There's a lot of evidence that they do these resets every 150 years ago. And I know it's a strange thing for people to get their heads around. But when you start to realize that none of what they tell us is true, as Napoleon said, history is a lie written by the winners, or it's a lie agreed upon, which is what it is. They just tell us what they want us to believe in order to lead us into this point where they can do this again. And you get to where we are now. A lot of people are waking up. There's a lot of population in the world. And the world isn't overpopulated, but there's a lot of people, and they're waking up to just how controlled everything is. So distract them with race wars and the breakdown of their societies and floods and wars and everything they can do to just distract them, and then use it as a means of depopulation, which is what all the wars are about as well, is depopulation and destroying infrastructure, destroying the civilization that came before us. Even look at World War II. They bombed Dresden to nothing. They bombed Berlin to rubble, bombed London to rubble. Not one bomb on number 10 Downing Street or Buckingham Palace or on the Reichstag or anything like that. Been trying to take out Assad in Syria for how many years? They bombed Aleppo and Palmyra and all these incredibly ancient places to rubble. Not one bomb on Assad's palace. It's never the leaders they attack. They destroy the infrastructure around them, and they depopulate as much as they can through all of these wars. And they're basically hiding the old world and blowing up and destroying all the old buildings. You've got buildings in Seattle that are incredibly wonderful looking buildings, and they've just put brick facades over, just bricked over and put a whole other level over the top just to uglify it so you don't see the architecture that's beneath it and behind it. Why would they be doing that? Why? Why are they trying to cover up what happened and what the old world was, and teach us that we are now at the pinnacle of human achievement, which is complete and utter bollocks? All you've got to do is look at some of the buildings through Europe and even through San Francisco and even in New York. I mean, even there's still these incredible old buildings through a lot of American cities, and they're even in Australian cities. I mean, Victoria Markets and stuff in Sydney, we're told this was built by convicts in 1820. Really? The convicts that came to Australia, they just happened to be incredible stonemasons. And of course, they used the earth-moving machinery that they brought with them on the First Fleet to dig a quarry so they could build a brick factory, so they could make these incredible ornate bricks, so they could build places like Queen Victoria Markets in Sydney, as you do when you're colonising a country and killing all the Aboriginal people.
Right.
Or was that building already there and they simply came and cleaned up the mess after the last reset? And I think there's a lot of evidence to support that.
Yeah, that is a fascinating concept. And what you said there about history, and you can only trust what you see in living history, is so true, because lately I've been stumbling upon, American history. In fact, I went and I asked, about 5 people, what do you think Abraham Lincoln, what do you think of the Civil War? And everyone's like, yeah, Abraham Lincoln was a great guy. They put him on a pedestal. He stopped slavery, which is complete bullshit, because the man was as racist as anyone. He didn't think blacks should live with whites. The Civil War had nothing to do with slavery. It was about the South paying 80% of the tax revenue and only getting about 20% back. It was about them seceding. The Union wanted. So you can't trust any of history. So that's my comment there. But what I see happening, and I'm wondering if you agree, is that the global elite, if you will, have they basically have all the money now, all the capital, all that they would ever need. The AI is in place. The robotics are in place. They've got control. They've got power. But like you said, people are waking up. So now it's like, what do they need to do? They need to tighten their grip on power. And the way to do that would be to eliminate a lot of people. And do you kind of see that?
And get you to do it, get you to do it yourself.
Yeah.
See, if you're waking up and you can see the world for what it is, and you're actively working to try and bring about some change and share the information with people, how can they stop you doing that? Well, they can convince the people next door that your ancestors oppressed them, and then the people next door are going to come start smashing your windows and stuff. And they're going to push you to a point, push buttons and trigger you to the point that you get angry and you start hating these people. Then you go out and you start fighting them. And you're not fighting the system. You're not dealing with the system at all. You're basically gone into a mode of self-protection or virtually like civil war within our little communities, just within our little suburbs. We got multicultural wars going on within distinct suburbs all over the United States, all over all of our countries. Everyone's arguing with their neighbors or arguing with the people next door or arguing with the migrants or whatever. They move you into a state of hate where you're dealing with so much stuff to trigger you all around you every day that your focus doesn't go on them. And people don't realize what the solution to it is. Again, they think there's a political solution. We've got to join politics and run for office and all this sort of stuff. Now, everything this government does is designed to get you to comply with things which are wrong. Why are you complying with it? Why is anybody complying with it? Why can't people step into their moral compass has been my argument the whole time. If people step into their moral compass, they refuse to comply with any rule or regulation which causes them to step outside their moral compass, then the world has to change, because this whole system is based on like I said, it supports the economic model and it discards people along the way. And everybody is against each other. We have problems in our lives. We're struggling. It's hard. The shops are closing. I can't put fuel in the car. I can't do this. I can't do that. Then your neighbor comes along, starts screaming at you about something. You'll get all that animosity and all that frustration, and you'll direct it at your neighbor and you'll start attacking them when they're doing that because they're in the same position as you. And they look at the system and they go, well, what can I do? I can't go and attack the government. I scream and shake my fist at the White House all I want. It's not going to do anything. But if I get angry at the guy next door, I can release some of that pent-up emotion. And if I can't do it with him, well, I'll go to a ball game and I'll cheer my team on. And this is all tribal stuff. Like ball games, action movies, all these things are pressure relief valves. Because if we didn't have these things to sort of build ourselves up and let that release and then sigh of relief and go home again, we would have had a revolution years and years ago. But that's what they do. They distract people with all of this stuff going on around them, so your focus can never really be on the system. And again, people are wanting to fight the system when the only thing that the system has really done to you is it's convinced you that the system is real. People believe authority is real. So they're fighting a cloud. The system only exists because people believe it exists, because they're taught that it exists, but it's a fiction. The government doesn't really exist. It's just this building that people go to and they write all these rules on paper and they say, oh, you've got to do this now. It's got a little fancy letterhead on it. And this guy was wearing a suit when he signed it. And so he has authority over you because we stamped it, Well, what the hell does that mean? That doesn't mean anything. Who are you? Why are you trying to control my lives? Show me any reason why I should be doing anything that you told me to do. Why can't I just be the best friend I could possibly be to everybody that I know? Why can't I live my life in Lakesh? I am another yourself, and I will do what I can to help your life and improve your life, not at the expense of mine, because I love myself as much as I love you. If people just simply had that attitude, we could change the world in a day. But nobody has that attitude. They think they have to fight against the system. As you say, what you resist persists. And this is because it's just your belief that the system is real, your belief that authority is real. That's why I think, there's no real way to get through this without simply letting it implode, because how are you going to change that mentality in people? And when you can see it, you can see how we could, if I could just put out this vibe and put out this energy and just reach everybody so they suddenly had this concept and understood that they have value and that this system only exists because they believe it is real and that authority is a superstition, we could change the world in 3 seconds. But how do I do that? And it would be that simple to simply change the world if everyone just suddenly realized, oh my God, I've been living a lie. I don't actually have to do what I'm told. All I have to do is what's in my heart, do the right thing in all that I do, and realize that all these people I'm fighting against all around me that have all been programmed to be this way. We've all been programmed to dislike each other and to argue amongst each other and to profit from each other. Even if you get within the economic system, you've got to exploit the earth or exploit other people around you in order to get the money you need to pay to be alive. And then the government's going to take it all from you anyway. How do we ever get into this position? And as people have lost sight of themselves, and we've lost self. It's a disconnection from self that has caused all of this. If I could do that, that would be the way to change the world. But how are you ever going to get people to see this from the situation that we're in now? You've basically got to let it implode and find yourself a safe path through it.
Yeah, I agree.
Hey, Max, you mentioned the government pushing division. So we're here in Minnesota, right outside of Minneapolis. You might recall that we are the ground zero for the George Floyd riots, which happened here. The death of George Floyd. I won't say the murder. I'll just say the death of George Floyd happened here. There is, some of us that have some questions about that event, whether it was planned, staged, etc. But do you have any thoughts on that? Because it seems like to a lot of us that whole event was put out there to convince the world that we have a racist society, and that's a huge issue for us. But do you have any thoughts on that event and the aftermath?
Well, very contrived and planned. I mean, whether George Floyd was tagged as the one to do it or not, or whatever. I mean, I think it was totally planned. The outcome was planned, and that's what I've said when you look at a lot of these events. People will argue over was he planned, was it this, was it that, was it that. Even with 9/11, was it thermite, was it this, was it nukes, it doesn't matter. It's how the legislation is going to be used. What is the event actually going to be used for? And that's what you've got to look at with all of these type of events. And I think if it wasn't George Floyd, it would have been someone else. They were just waiting for the right opportunity, or perhaps they set him up to do it, set him up with a fake $20 bill so they could just start the ball in motion. And whether the cop knew he was involved or whatever, you can argue all these things and argue the finer details all you like. But it was definitely a very, very beneficial event for the government. It definitely steered society in the direction they wanted society to go, and they made it a focal point. And even with that now, I mean, you've got statues of George Floyd around the place, and the people that know this guy was a crack dealing porn star. I mean, trading counterfeit notes. He wasn't this wonderful person. That will get the people in the local society angry every time they see the statue. So that tends when they go into the supermarket, they start abusing the person behind the counter, and they start arguing with their wife or arguing with their neighbors or whatever because they just looked at that George Floyd statue that day. So it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Put it in your face and use it to control and lead the world where they want to lead it, but do it in such a way that it creates animosity between people. It's all been very, very contrived. And yeah, that was a very pivotal event when that happened. And then what we saw, the defunding of the police and what's gone on in Seattle and or everything that's led to what we are now, this Black Lives Matter, the whole trashing of department stores and liquor stores and people trashing the iPhone store and getting away with it and blah, blah, blah. So it's all come off the back of that. And it's all part of the breakdown of society. Divide and conquer, brother. That's the motto. And when they can put an obvious fraud in your face like that, the main thing it does, I mean, sure, you're going to have all the sleeping NPCs and sleeping masses are going to take it on board and use it as a means of going and projecting themselves on the rest of the world. But then you've got the people who can see through it as well, who get incredibly frustrated and incredibly angry that the other people aren't seeing it, who play along and do the same thing, basically. They'll go and argue against all these Antifa and Black Lives Matter people and stuff. Well, they simply should ignore the whole thing. I've often said that the way to get through this is for people to be the best they can be, to be the type of friend that you would want to have as a friend, to be the best person you can be through the world and to lead by example in what you do. You've got to have no stake in the outcome of where this society is going. If the society is going to implode around you, well, it's going to implode around you. It's what you're going to do through that and what you're going to do in this situation, what you're going to do with the information that's been given to you. And that's I think the position that we're in, brother. But yeah, it was a really pivotal event. It was totally staged, totally planned. Like I said, I mean, I think maybe the players, they figure out along the way, here's a good opportunity. We'll go here and we'll do this one and do this guy. And even whether the people involved know what they're involved in is debatable. You can't really go judging or blaming anybody. And it's important that we don't get caught arguing over the finer details all the time. And this is what destroyed the 9/11 truth movement when we knew it wasn't what the government said. But then people started saying, well, if it wasn't that, then what was it? And if it wasn't 19 hijackers, then who was it? And if it wasn't planes that brought the building down, then what was it? Was it thermite? Was it micronukes? Was it directed energy weapons? And then those three camps start arguing with each other. And before you know it, they're just off. And they're still arguing. Like 20 years later, they're still arguing about it. Nothing's been done about it. No one looked at the bigger picture. Everyone started arguing over their little personal detail. And it got to the point that I've got my detail I'm focused on, and I need to be right in that detail. So I'm just going to argue that point until I win the argument, which is completely counterproductive. So it's kind of the same with the whole George Floyd thing. You've got to be careful. And sure, we'd like to know, and I'm not telling people not to research. We'd like to know what the details are. But there's a bigger picture. If we can deal with the bigger picture, then what happened will eventually become self-evident. But we've got to step back and we've got to look at the bigger picture and see where we're being led and realize that what this is about, what this whole war that we are in, and it is a war, but what it's about is freedom. That's all it's about. That's all it's ever been about, is freedom. And if you really want to get to the truth of everything and know all the little details, was something I've often said, the real truth is, in investigating all this stuff, even the resets and everything that I talk about, there's a lot of evidence to support it. Do I know it's true? No, I don't. Because the real truth is that nobody knows what the real truth is. And that's the truth. And people aren't prepared to admit that because they are so desperate to be right. I've gone down my particular rabbit hole. I've looked at this particular evidence. This is my focus. And I need to prove to you that this is true. Well, what for? I just put it on a possibility. What is true is we're living in a prison. This earth is a prison, and we have a real opportunity to establish freedom here if we could just stop arguing over the details. There's a train coming. There's a train coming, and we are standing square on the tracks, and people are arguing what the tracks are made of and who laid the tracks and what sort of wood they used and are these rails straight? And no, there's a train coming. Perhaps you should get off the tracks, and then we will find out who built the tracks after that. You know what I mean? The truth will become self-evident once we've established freedom, because that is all that this is about. And this is one of the greatest opportunities for freedom we've ever had, because the system is laid bare. So many people can see it now. And they, like I said, they get down these rabbit holes and they get focused on it instead of stepping back and looking at the bigger picture and realizing this is a huge opportunity for freedom if we can just get that focus on ourselves and do the inner work.
Yeah, I agree 100%. You talk of truth and then racism there, and it's like, I love the truth. There's so many people that are just afraid. They don't want to dig. Bread and circuses, as long as they can watch Dancing with the Stars, they don't care. But, I came across this. You might be aware of this, but, I know what truth is, objective truth that's out there. But the world has become this freak show now where there's, in Canada, the Mathematics Association is saying that the 2 + 2 = 4 is a white Western answer that marginalizes other possible answers. I mean, we're kind of being dehumanized, demoralized to this point where if you feel like you're a woman today, you can be a woman, and if someone doesn't believe that, well then shit, we've got a problem with you. I mean, it's just bizarre. But you know what? I'm one that's not afraid of the truth, and I think you're right. You need to step back and see the whole picture, but it's difficult.
Well, little truths like that. I mean, you can be a woman, a man can be a woman. I mean, these sorts of things are, if they can get you to believe this, they can get you to believe anything.
Yeah.
Honestly, so that's a lot of what that's really all about. Like, it's pure stupidity what they're giving us now. Like, it's completely backwards. 2 + 2 = 4 is a racist, white supremacist thing. I don't know. If I've got two peas on the table here and I mix them with 2 more peas, to me it looks like there's 4 there now. I don't know how that's a racist. The peas are green, for God's sake.
Yeah.
So whose race are we talking about here? And if they can convince you that a man is a woman and a woman is a man and you can be anything you want to be, well, they can convince you of absolutely anything. So I mean, this is what I mean. That's why you've got to kind of step back and just put yourself in that right frame of mind and see the light at the end of the tunnel and just sort of kind of go grey and just navigate your way through it. You go there and argue with all these people all you want. I know a man can't be a woman. Why? Why bother? I mean, if they really believe that, or you think you're going to convince these people to actually see sense, it's crazy. I mean, if they're that gone and that demented that they actually believe this stuff, hey, let them go out and take the jab, and let the human race just kind of discard all this extra baggage that it's got. You know, in many ways, this is a form of soul purification. They'll put all the bait out there, and you can be as stupid as you want. You can destroy your intelligence, destroy your mentality, and believe all this crap that they're telling you as much as you want. You know, but ultimately, you know, it's just going to bring about your own demise. It's going to bring about the demise of this society. But it's people's own sole choice as to what they do at this point. I mean, like I said, I mean, it's stupid. It's completely and utterly stupid. So it isn't even a point where the world is corrupt anymore, or it's misinformation anymore. Like, it's blatant stupidity. So, you know, what do you do in the face of this, brother? It just gets frustrating. And you can't let yourself be overcome by that. You've just got to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and allow the baggage to discard itself, because that's what it's doing.
Yeah, I like that answer.
Hey, Max, a moment ago you mentioned 9/11 and, not arguing about the details, whether or not 9/11, direct energy weapon, thermite, nukes, whatever. Speaking of direct energy weapons, Dr. Judy Wood for many, many years now has said that 9/11 was, the buildings came down with a direct energy weapon. Many people in the truth movement and the 9/11 truth movement thought she was crazy. Because everyone's very convinced at that point that it was thermite that took down the buildings, and she was crazy. Now, about 2 months ago, the Maui fires has really brought this idea of a direct energy weapon to the forefront, and people are realizing, wait a second, maybe this idea of a direct energy weapon isn't all that crazy. Look what they just did in Maui, especially if you look at some of the aerial footage that clearly shows things that should be burnt that are not, next to things that are burnt. And vice versa. So I'm just curious. You alluded to a moment ago. I know we shouldn't argue about the details, especially when it involved with like 9/11, where there's numerous theories out there. But a lot of people are waking up for the first time to the concept of the direct energy weapon that even exists, and that now they're admitting it. There's a direct energy weapon lab in Maui. Some people say there's direct energy weapons in the satellites. Do you have any thoughts on that? And if that is true, aren't we really screwed? I mean, isn't it? Can't they just do that to anyone then, and anywhere in the world? There's no place safe then, if that is really true.
Well, I think it is true. I mean, I was very impressed with Judy Wood's book, actually. But again, I think it was contrived and controlled. I think they built the Twin Towers to destroy them. I think that's why they did it. I mean, even the coincidences, of course, they're just coincidences that happened on 9/11. Like you got Flight 11 with a crew of 11 people on board. Comes and hits an 11-shaped building on 9/11. That's interesting. No symbolism there. Just all coincidences, of course. And I think very likely they included thermite in the concrete of the towers when they built the towers. And there were reports that the firemen were saying there were bombs going off in the lobby. So people are saying they were brought down by bombs, controlled demolition. People are saying they were brought down by thermite. People are saying they were brought down by directed energy weapons. I think they were brought down by all three. There's certainly instances where you're seeing the trim towers and you're seeing thermite pour out. I mean, this is thermite. It's not aluminium melting. It's thermite. You can tell that it's thermite just from the color of it, the way it's falling. So I think there were areas where they used a whole lot. They put bombs in the basement. They put bombs on certain floors. They blew out certain pillars on the way down, and they used directed energy weapons to turn the whole tower to dust. I think they used all of them. Perfect way to get you arguing over what it was. And I think these details are important, but again, it's the bigger picture that is more important. What they did in Maui was obviously directed energy weapons. What they did in Paradise, California was directed energy weapons. They've got patents going back as far as in the 40s where they're talking about this sort of stuff. Patents in the 40s from where they're seeding clouds. I mean, we know they use these things. We know they exist. I had a video on one of my recent reports where there was a kid who made a directed energy weapon out of the guts out of a power drill.
That was unbelievable.
In his back room. And that was 9 or 10 years old, that video. And that's a kid doing this. So what do you think the government can do? Of course they can. But why wouldn't they use all of them to get you arguing over what it was? And I think this was why the Twin Towers were built. I think they built them there and made them this big thing because they intended on bringing them down when it was time to do it. I think the whole thing is contrived, brother. But like I said, I mean, it's interesting to look at all this stuff, but we get caught up in arguing over the details. What we need to realize is where it's going, what the legislation is going to be. Realize that all these governments, all these politicians are abusing the positions that they hold, and we have to hold them to account. I mean, you guys, you've got to take your country back because they're trying to bring down America, and if America falls, then the world will fall with it, which is an unfortunate reality. And you look at what they've done to America. Look at the streets. Look at the fentanyl and trank everywhere. It was just in Philadelphia. Now it's also in San Francisco. It's in Boston. It's coming to New York. It's all over the place. So they're destroying your country from within in every single way that they can, while people are busy arguing over the details. But yeah, I think directed energy weapons are real. I think they very likely used them on 9/11. But again, I'm not going to say that's a given, and I'm not going to argue about it because ultimately I don't care. What I care about is what the event was used for and where they're taking the world. But I think Judy Wood did some great work on that, and I totally respect her for it. And I've got her book at home and in Australia on the bookshelf. Unfortunately, um, she's got a very left brain. She's got a I don't know. I've seen some of her interviews, and they were shocking, like really shocking. It was almost embarrassing to watch them. She gets very irate in her interviews. A lot of people have said to me I should interview her, and I've looked at her interviews and I thought, like, no, you're doing more damage than you need to with your interviews. Better off just letting people read your book because you're kind of taking things a little bit too seriously. And some of the interviews have done damage to her, I think, and done damage to her research. I'm sorry, Judy Wood, if you ever watch this interview, I don't mean anything bad about you at all, but it's just a more reasonable way of dealing with people and with being interviewed. And I highly recommend people read her book because I think it's very compelling. I actually even gave it to David Icke to read when I was in Australia. And I met David Icke. We went down to Ayers Rock together, and I had Judy Wood's book with me at the time, and I actually lent it to him for 3 days to read while we were in Uluru, and he was impressed with it as well. So, yeah, I think it's a distinct possibility. But again, why argue over it? It's not going to get anywhere. Even if you say, okay, well, I win the argument. Well, what does that achieve? We're still heading towards the same direction because people were so busy arguing over the details for the last 5 years and they didn't deal with the perpetrators of the crime.
Yeah,
So,
that brings me to a question. So, looking down, where are we going with this? So I've been reading lately, I've stumbled upon Ryan Dawson's work and Chris Bolan and, Israel, the role they played. And now I've been digging into this Abrahamic eschatology, and the Jewish people are waiting for a red heifer. And is part of this kind of preparing for end times in this? I mean, do you look into any of that at all, Max?
oh yeah, they definitely are preparing for the end times. Well, it says that they won't get the land of Israel and all that sort of stuff until the final battle. This is why you'll get a lot of Orthodox Jews who say Israel is an abomination. It's not supposed to exist. We're not permitted to, the Jewish people aren't permitted to have a state, have a country to themselves until after the final battle. And you have a lot of these European Jewish converts that have gone down to Israel and done what they've done. And they're working really hard to bring about that final battle. They want to see the world implode. And even when you start looking into the war against Amalek, the whole role in the Torah, and they want to destroy Amalek, which is essentially the white people, the white races, essentially America. Yeah, they're playing a very, very significant role in what's happening. Just go back and look at Bolshevism. Look what happened in 150 years ago with these people. There's a reason they've been kicked out of a lot of different countries, and there's a reason that they have created this whole anti-Semitic sort of concept that you can't say anything against them if you do it's anti-Semitic. Yeah, they're doing a lot of bad things, but again, it's through our compliance. Now, even with the whole Jewish question, I mean, if you know these people are doing all these really bad things and you know they're in control of your government, why are you complying with the dictates of your government? Why are you using all the technology they give you to use? Why are you doing all these things and then complaining that it's them when it's actually you participating in all this stuff? Because you know this, you know it's them. So why
Yeah.
are you still going along with their rules? You get to a point where who's really to blame? Is it our collective failure to take responsibility for ourselves which has caused this problem? Maybe it wasn't to begin with. I mean, maybe people were programmed into it. They were led to this point, like I said, but we know that now. So what are you going to do? You could go and take out all the Jews. You go and kill all the Jews, kill all the Freemasons, kill all the Jesuits, all of them. And if you haven't changed what's in your heart and you haven't changed your moral compass and you're still using all this technology they gave you, then who's to blame? Nothing's going to change. You're just going to lead yourself back to the same point we are now through your need to blame other people all the time. Like I said, we could change the world in a day if people suddenly realize they have value. But yeah, I mean, there is a lot to the whole Jewish question. They've done a lot of bad things, and what do you do? I mean, you can't say anything about that because if you do, you're anti-Semitic. You're a hater. So
Yeah.
it's crazy, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, the ADL will cancel you.
Oh yeah, they do that.
Yeah, Max, you said something a few minutes ago. I once again just find super profound and so important that we should not argue about the details. And not to go back to 9/11, but you alluded to that, there's some division in the 9/11 truth movement as far as how the buildings came down, thermite, DEW, etc. Now, can that same type of scenario be witnessed in the COVID truth movement? Whether or not
Oh
the
yeah.
virus is real or not, whether or not it was from a lab or not, whether it was leaked from the lab on purpose or not. Isn't this all the same kind of details that people are arguing about, just like the 9/11 question of how the buildings actually came down? Isn't that also the same kind of thing that's happening here with the COVID truth movement?
It is, absolutely. And that's why I don't often go down that direction. I mean, I lean towards the reality that viruses don't exist because a lot of the stuff that I've looked at there it makes a lot of sense to me. But I'm not going to argue that point over you. If you believe viruses do exist and this is released from a lab, okay, not a problem. You can believe that. I don't care. It's what is it being used for? Was the action that the government took really to protect us from a virus, or was it to lock us down further and to control us the way they're doing? I mean, and if it was leaked from a lab, well, it was probably deliberate. And if it doesn't exist, well, then all the response has definitely been deliberate. But ultimately, it's all leading towards the same thing. It doesn't matter whether it was a real virus or whether it wasn't a virus. It's the legislation they put in. It's the lockdowns. It's the destruction of businesses. It's the wearing of masks. It's doing all the stuff they did to you and all the stuff they did to the world as a result of this alleged pandemic. I'm not going to get in and argue with you whether you think the pandemic is real or not. And it doesn't matter what I believe because I don't really believe anything. Like I said, I lean towards the concept that this whole thing has been a complete fraud from day one. And I was able to call that within 3 days of people dropping in China. I was actually saying, "Hang on, this is fake. This whole thing is fake," and that's just my particular perspective. But like if you want to believe viruses are real, go ahead. I don't care. It doesn't matter because ultimately it's the same result. And that's what needs to be focused on. Look at the results of what this pandemic has done. Look what they've done to our societies. Look what they're leading us into. Start 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And suddenly they want to have digital IDs and vaccine passports. And they're applying all of these lockdowns and all these restrictions now to climate change. And if you start looking at climate change, and don't get me started on that. I mean, yeah, the climate's changed. That's why we have a weather department. The climate's been changing for thousands of years. It's not man-made. It's nothing that they're telling us. But all of this stuff it's all, and we predicted this as well, that they were going to do the flip. They were going to bring in all these restrictions and legislations and all this shit, and then they were going to apply it to climate change and say, oh, look how much the world's been improved by you being locked down in your house for the last 4 years. And they're going to continue to do that. So you've got to look at the end result with all of it, brother. I mean, people will believe whatever they want to believe, and that's fine. I don't care. You believe whatever you want, but let's step back and look at the end result of what they are actually doing with this opportunity that they've got. As George Bush said, there is crisis or there is opportunity in all crisis. You see crisis, I see opportunity, Yeah, sure you do, George. And that's what it's about. That's the way to look at all of this sort of stuff. So we've got to see where we're being led. It doesn't matter. They want you arguing over whether you believe viruses are real or whether you believe they're fake. They don't want you looking at the bigger picture. They want you to believe that the politicians just messed up. They got wrong information. No, all this has been planned. It's all been orchestrated. And they put the concepts out there, I think. They put 2 or 3 different concepts out there just to get you arguing over the details. And like I said, I'm not saying that I don't want to know the details. I'd love to know how it all happened. Like with 9/11, I'd love to know all the inner stuff about it. But I'm not going to make that a focal point while the world's been turned into a prison around me. I'm going to deal with the prison walls that are being built. Once I've pulled these walls down, then maybe the details will become self-evident. But if I'm just going to be focused on arguing over the details, well, the walls are just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's about people arguing over whether the Earth is globe or whether it's flat. It's a prison. I don't care what shape it is. It's a prison, and it's being consolidated. And if we don't stop arguing about the shape of the tracks, the train's going to hit us. So let's deal with the prison. Let's establish freedom. Then you won't have to argue. You'll be able to go and find out what shape the Earth is. You're going to do all this sort of stuff because you're free to go and actually find out. All of these arguments detract from freedom, and freedom is all that this is about. It's the only thing this is about, because that is what is being removed from us while we're busy arguing over details. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's important, brother, for us to shift our focus on all these things.
Yeah, I agree. And, I look just like you, Max. I think the whole thing was planned. I don't know. My first interview was Dr. Andrew Kaufman. I know you're familiar with him. And so,
he's a lovely guy, Andy Kaufman. He's a really, really nice man. I've spent a fair bit of time in his company, and he's a great guy.
Very smart man. And, it's hard. He's going to win the argument when it comes down if there's a virus or not. And I'm a respiratory therapist. And I told him, you make 100%. I don't know where. I think I'm like you, Max. I kind of lean probably. I actually, just before the interview, I'm like, maybe I lean 51%. There's a virus. But again, you're right. It's just, but I will tell you this. I'm a respiratory therapist, 22 years working at the bedside in intensive care units. Whether it was the power of suggestion or chemtrails or 5G or whatever it was, there was something new. There was a new set of symptoms that I had never seen before, with these things called happy hypoxia and the losing the taste and smell and the clots. There was something new, but again, we could argue about that all day and get nowhere. We just know that it's planned. And I always ask every guest.
I mean, it could have been EM stuff from cell phones. I mean, we don't know.
Yeah.
You look at some of the patents they've got of how they can affect your biology and your mentality through cell phone radiation, through just EM radiation. So who knows? I mean, who knows what they could have put in? They could have been putting stuff in the water and stuff in the food and whatever, and hit you with frequencies. And I mean, you don't know. You don't know. That's what I mean. We can go down these rabbit holes. We can argue all these details all we want. You got to look at the bigger picture. What are they going to do with this? Where's it leading to? 2 weeks to flatten the curve became what our societies are now. It's just crazy. And through it, people are still arguing over whether this is real or that's real or whatever. So you got to step back from the bigger picture. You look at the bigger picture. You got to step back and really, really sort of see what's going on here, and not get caught up in the details as much as we want to know. Because like I said, once we've established freedom, the details will become self-evident, but we lose our focus on the end goal. It's like when you're a runner in a marathon race, your focus is on that finish line. You're not worried about whether they laid this particular piece of grass here or painted the ground that way, whether it's nice. Gee, this piece of ground I'm running on isn't as nice as the piece of ground I was running on 50 yards back. You're not thinking about that stuff. Now, who mowed the lawn here? You're not thinking about that. You're focused on the finish line, and that's what we need to do. We need to get some focus on the finish line.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're almost out of studio time here, and I have 2 questions. The one I don't want you to answer because I know I always ask every guest, do you believe we're being depopulated? I know your answer, yes. But yeah. I guess my next question for you, and I think it's an important one because you've been right about so much, and the viewers should pay attention to this. And before we do go, I want to make sure that everyone knows to go to thecrowhouse.com, find Max on Rumble, find Max on Telegram, and please support this man. I don't want to get into this much, but he's been displaced. If he hadn't fled from Australia, he might be in a box or a cage. He's in Mexico right now. Please support Max and his work so we continue to get his walk and talks in this. You watch these videos, you're going to find stuff you're not finding anywhere else. You need to support Max. But I'd like, Max, for you to give us your prediction. What do you think is the next big thing that we can expect in the next year? What should we prepare for the next year or two?
I think the US economic system is absolutely going to go down. I think the US is going to lose its place as the world reserve currency. They might even try to stage some sort of a hot war between the United States and Russia. I don't know whether that'll be beneficial to them. I mean, I look at the world as one big global holding company, and it's all they're all working together. I don't think Putin's the good guy or anything, but there may be some sort of a hot war on the ground in the United States. Um, with the will come with the crash of the economy as well. I mean, you're sending so much equipment and weapons and stuff overseas, and so much money overseas to Ukrainians. Most of the money's been laundered back to US politicians and to politicians around the world. It's a huge money laundering operation at the moment. But the United States is stretched really thin militarily, and most of the weaponry is being sent offshore. I mean, if you had someone like China or someone come in and invade the United States now, it would be very difficult for the United States to defend itself against any type of foreign invasion. And the United States has never experienced a hot war on their own ground. I mean, except for the Civil War or the War of Independence a few hundred years ago, whatever. But no modern warfare you've seen on American soil. And I just wonder how much the United States could deal with that. But they're working to implode the United States from within. Is why they've burnt like over 1,000 food processing plants, derailing trains. Now you've got all these looters and rioters smashing up infrastructure in all your cities. You're seeing the dollar is plummeting in value. The bringing bricks online as well overseas. So, the one thing that maintains the US lifestyle is the fact that the United States is the world reserve currency, and I think that's going to change very, very soon. Maybe it's been delayed a little bit through the floods they just staged in Greece and Turkey and all the stuff that's happened over there, because all these countries had coincidentally just signed on to BRICS, and then suddenly we've got massive floods and fires going through all these countries. And they're controlling the weather, folks. So this is a whole nother show. They've got patents going back for years and years and years controlling the weather. Since the 40s, they even said we can see clouds and make it rain. In the 40s. They could bring lightning bolts down in clouds, and it's directed energy weapons, of course. I mean, it's all there in the public domain. So whether they can bring this into the United States, I think they will. And they're working really hard to ensure that your country is imploding from within at the moment through the complete social breakdown we're seeing in the United States. So I'd say, yeah, get yourself to safe ground, get in touch with your life skills. You've got to be prepared to just be able to walk out of the city and walk into the forest with a rope and a knife, and know that you can survive because you've got the life skills to do it. I think that's what we're seeing in the United States, but it's going to be a complete breakdown of just about everything, and then it's going to be dog eat dog. And you need to realize that I don't think there's any real way to stop it. What's coming, and the United States is the key. People may stand up. Who knows? They may stand up, and they may, try to install some sort of a proper system of government in the country. Who knows? But so much infrastructure has been broken down around it. The transport companies, the food production, everything. You're running out of everything at the moment, and I think it's. I mean, either way, it's either going to implode and everybody's just it's going to turn to complete chaos, or it's going to implode and there's going to be a phoenix rise from the ashes, which will be us. And I think, ultimately that's what's going to happen. I think we're going to win this battle,
I agree.
but it's going to get a lot uglier yet. And people need to really get in touch with their life skills and really be prepared to simply be able to walk away from the system. If they don't do that and they're too dependent on the system, and when it does collapse, if they're calling for politicians to come and fix it, well, they're the ones who created the problem. So no, they're not going to. Like I said, it's difficult to predict at this moment because we're kind of heading into uncharted territory. We're in a situation where, I've been working for years to try to prevent this very situation from coming about, which is why I even started doing these shows back in 2007, 2008, to try to just wake the world up to where we're headed and to prevent this train from ever reaching the station. But now it's here, and things are about to implode in a pretty dramatic way. So, yeah, I mean, it's difficult to predict, brother. It's really difficult to predict. But I think, like I said, whether they've got to go to a hot war, whether they can simply do it by imploding the place from within, they're able to change their plans all the time, depending on the scenario as it unfolds. So, but it's we're not going back to what we were. I don't think that's ever going to happen. And I think the only way through this really is to allow the system to implode and to be emotionally, physically, and spiritually prepared to find your way through to that light at the end of the tunnel, brother, whatever that's going to be.
Yeah, and you know what, Max, you've been one that you know I was already kind of preparing for that, but seeing you 3 4 years ago has really made me. I'm prepared. I'm prepared for that. I prepare every day, mentally, spiritually, physically. I'm ready for it, and yeah, I can't thank you enough. But I want to tell the audience one more time. This man is offering, Max is offering all of his work for free. You can go to his website and watch his documentaries. You can read his articles. You can watch these videos. This is valuable information. I mean, everyone's paying for what? Coffee at dinner or what? Going to a football game? Buy this man a coffee. Please make a donation to Max. And yeah, you're spot on, Max. And again, this is a bucket list interview for me, and I cannot thank you enough for your time today.
My pleasure, brother. Thank you for all the kind words and the kind thoughts. And it has been a little difficult, you know. I've been deplatformed and debanked and everything everywhere when I left Australia. But hey, it's all good. I'm getting by. I'm okay. But I do appreciate the offer of support and stuff, brother. So yeah, thank you. And we'll do it again. We'll come on have another chat. It's been a good chat.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, in a few months I'll reach out again. But please do help Max out here. I know I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna make a donation, and I expect at least 1,000 of you folks to buy him a cup of coffee. We need to do that. And so thank you for tuning into the Truth Expedition. It's been a hell of an expedition today. Don't tread on me and don't shed on me.